Good afternoon and welcome to Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. We're calling today's program an Across the Fence potpourri. In the first half, we pay a visit to UVM Proctor Maple Research Center with Across the Fence's field producer Ben Willis. Next up is a return to the woods, this time on the trail of some feathered friends, as Caleb May brings us to the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge with the UVM Birding Club. And our last story today is a postcard from Keith Silva of Honey Hollow Falls in Bolton. The Proctor Maple Research Center was established in 1947 on land granted to UVM by then-Governor Mortimer Proctor to research, as he put it, the aristocrat of sweets. Maple and the men and women of UVM's Proctor Maple Research Center are always considered royalty around here. Let's join Ben Willis as he visits Underhill and the sugarhouse at the Proctor Maple Research Center.
This is my first visit to the Proctor Maple Research Center. I'm here to speak with UVM maple specialist Mark Isselhart to learn about some innovations in the maple industry. All right, let's go inside and check it out. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Ben.
Great to see you.
Welcome.
Thanks for joining us today.
Since 2016, Mark has been UVM's maple specialist, where he works with Vermont's maple producers
Boy, it's right on the line.
to help ensure the success of the state's maple industry.
So, Mark, the traditional image of maple syrup production is buckets and horses, but I don't see any buckets around here.
Right. So that technology still works as well as it did 100 years ago, and there are still people who use it. The difference is modern maple production really relies on plastic tubing and a supplemental vacuum to accentuate the pressure differences inside the tree and outside of the tree. At the end of the day, that just means you get a higher yield of sap per tap than you would if you were using more traditional techniques like a bucket.
So what are some other innovations that we might see here?
So this research center employs modern techniques, certainly reverse osmosis, which is essentially a filter which takes out molecules that are as small as water molecules, but the larger sugar molecules that are found in sap won't fit through the filter. So what you end up doing is taking 75–80% of the water out of the sap using a very efficient pump and filter system rather than a pretty inefficient system of atmospheric boiling. So the traditional evaporator is essentially a big ball of flame underneath a thin metal pan with liquid, in this case sap, boiling. That takes a lot of energy to remove the water from the sap. The reverse osmosis machine will, using pressure and electricity, force the water through that filter, thereby separating out a large amount of the water. Then you boil that concentrated sap in a traditional evaporator. That's where the color and flavor gets formed, is in the evaporator.
We have a sign out front that says bird-friendly maple. Can you tell me a little bit about what that means?
Sure. So bird-friendly maple is a project initiated by the Audubon of Vermont. And this is a third-party recognition of operations that produce maple syrup that have adopted practices in their forest management to promote healthy habitats, healthy trees, and more complexity in the sugar bush to really foster bird habitat. If you imagine sort of that quintessential sugar bush where you have large, widely spaced, mature trees and virtually nothing in the understory, that's not a very hospitable habitat for migratory birds and other species. And what the Bird-Friendly Maple Project does is assesses what's on the ground in your operation, gives you feedback on how many trees you have per acre, what size they are there standing dead trees that might provide cavities for insects that feed certain bird species? Is there complexity in the structure from top to bottom? Are there lots of little trees and medium-sized trees? And is there material in the ground that can provide habitat for birds that nest closer to the ground rather than higher up? So it's not a regulation, it's not a law, it's something that producers voluntarily enter into And if they meet certain criteria in terms of diversity of species, tree species in their woods, and all these other attributes, then they can designate that their syrup is produced using bird-friendly practices.
So Mark, maple production is weather dependent. How is climate change affecting the maple industry?
Right. There's a lot of complexity to answering that question. A lot of times we want to talk about time scale. What's happening right now? What are the influences of weather right now? And then what are going out further in time? What are the bigger picture climate related issues? So right now, sugar makers are definitely seeing the ideal weather for sap production, which would be that freezing temperatures followed by above freezing temperatures in sort of a cycle. We're seeing the best concentration of those days moving earlier in the calendar than before. So whereas people might be tapping end of February in the past, now we're seeing people tap quite early. And the starting of when you tap is important based on the weather, but it's also important to know how many taps you have. So if you have, say, 500 taps, you can do that in a couple of days. Someone who has 50,000 taps has to really think well in advance. When is that weather showing up at my location? And how many people do I have that are skilled enough to do a good job tapping? Then you start working out the number of days it's going to take to do it. So we actually see the largest operations in Vermont tapping in December, starting to tap in December or January, which is really pretty much unheard of, except that all those factors I mentioned, really large operations, limited labor, all those things push the date earlier and earlier when people have to start tapping. So that's pretty important. Right now, sugar makers are dealing with warm temperatures. Warm temperatures are associated with maybe not ideal sap flow when it stays warm and doesn't freeze up. So although it hasn't gotten hot, and you could debate what is a hot temperature, but certainly we haven't seen anything in the 70s. We've seen temperatures in the 50s and 60s, but we haven't hit that really high temperature that can sometimes close off the tap holes and really see a reduced amount of sap and definitely reduced quality. Another issue that we're dealing with are natural disturbances. So the forests in Vermont and elsewhere have evolved with natural disturbances as part of the way in which the forest evolves over time. So wind events, flooding events, lack of moisture events, defoliation from invasive species as well as native defoliators. Those things do happen. What we seem to be seeing a little bit more of is more dramatic changes, certainly high wind events. We've seen several in the past year here in Vermont. That can be an influence on production because we're not planting annuals here. We're cultivating healthy annual plants or trees. When those get blown over or significantly damaged, it's a big impact on production.
Well, this has been very informative. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me. It's amazing to learn about how the maple industry keeps adapting. I can't wait to see what they come up with next. At the Proctor Maple Research Center, I'm Ben Willis with Across the Fence.
Thanks, Ben. From Underhill, we take 104 and head up the interstate to Swanton and the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge. Like the Proctor Maple Research Center, the Wildlife Refuge was established in the 1940s. It's considered the most significant area on Lake Champlain for waterfowl conservation. Researchers from the UVM Biology Department and several student clubs flock to this spot to learn about all sorts of birds of a feather, not to mention history, geography, and geology. UVM junior and Across the Fence contributor Caleb May was on the wing with UVM's Birding Club when they recently went to the refuge to do some, as it turned out, snowshoeing and birdwatching.
Sometimes I get things like orange-crowned warbler listed or other kinds of species, but what we had in the air this So it's really causing some changes. I think in
I can't look at the rocket launch, the trophy wives of the astronauts, and I won't listen to their words, 'cause I like birds. I don't care for walking downtown, crazy auto car gonna mow me down. Look at all the people like cows in a herd. Well, I like birds.
Our thanks to Caleb for shooting and editing that video. Our last story today brings us a rite of spring, the snow melt. Mud season is upon us, and the snow and ice melt and mountain streams run apace. We leave you today with a video from a few years ago when Keith Silva stopped by Honey Hollow Falls in the foothills of Camel's Hump. From the crew and our contributors at Across the Fence, I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one.